You are listening to the Breaking Progressives podcast with Alex Merced. On this podcast, we will take left-wing narratives from left-wing articles and dismantle them and break them down to see what's real and what's not real. If you enjoy the show, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/alexmerced or visiting libertydeal.info for all sorts of great deals and offers that you can take advantage of. Thank you very much and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced and you're listening to Breaking Progressives. And on this week's episode, we're looking at an article from alternate.org. And the article is called Marijuana Monster Money. California makes more from cannabis than the next 5 largest crops combined. Overall, I agree with the sentiment of the article. That is the whole that the prohibition on marijuana needs to end. But it's making this case by saying, well, look what a huge industry it is. It really shouldn't matter how huge the marijuana industry is. And if anything, that might actually scare some people from wanting to legalize it, especially the people who fear growth of marijuana use and drug use, etc. But there are some things to take into consideration. Because basically it's arguing that California made $24 billion. That's just what's been legally recognized and making it one of the top 5 crops, one of the hugest money makers in California's economy. Since California is one of those states where marijuana to some extent is legal. Now you also got Colorado. I think they might have done that in Massachusetts as well. So it's a growing thing. And it's a good trend. But the things that the numbers it outlines is that basically marijuana is going for like $1,200 a pound. And another thing you always hear liberals point out is that how much tax revenue it brings in. Making something legal shouldn't be on the basis that you can tax it. And you don't need to create a separate tax for marijuana. Normal sales taxes would already apply to anything that you sell. So saying that you want to create a separate tax on marijuana is just double taxing the item on top of ordinary corporate income taxes that the companies have to pay, plus the sales taxes that consumers have to pay when they buy the product. And that gets into some real serious ethical issues, because in states like Rhode Island, where you have medical marijuana, and New York, where you have medical marijuana, there is an additional tax. And the only time you can really even qualify for medicinal marijuana is if you're in some real chronic condition, sometimes basically on the road to terminal illness or have a terminal illness. And usually at this point you're not working, you're not generating an income, so you're just adding insult to injury, saying that, you know what, first you have to get a permit to buy this drug that you want to use as a medicine to help you deal with pain and the things that you're living with. We're going to make you have to go fill out a permit. That's going to take you some time, get some approvals, find the right doctors who are also willing to do the permit and comply with all the proper regulations, which is going to take time. And in that time, you're suffering from pain. You're losing time in your life, that's whatever is left of it. And then by the time you finally are able to buy the drug, we're going to add to the price by giving it an additional tax. That just adds insult to injury. So I find the whole idea of selling the legalization of a good on the basis of taxing always a weird argument, an argument I really don't like. But we should make drugs legal because, one, people have a right to choose what they put in their body. Okay? Now, are people going to put things that maybe shouldn't be in their body? Yeah. People do that now. People are going to do it whether it's legal or illegal. But by making it illegal, you do create more harm. Prohibition creates more harm. And it's not just marijuana. It's all drugs. Okay? Just to give you, and this is basically the things I'm going to outline now apply to prohibition of anything. And this is where you start seeing inconsistencies between the right and the left. While the left understands when it comes to prohibition of drugs, and they can understand the effects of prohibition, but then they seem to become blind to this when it starts coming to other issues, such as hate and guns. While the right becomes blind to the effects of prohibition when it comes to things like immigration and drugs. But at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. When you make something hard to get, hard to do, or illegal to do, you're going to have negative consequences. Because one, you create a black market for it, as we see in drugs, and black markets are violent. Because basically what happens is when you have a legal business, your arrangements with other people and other businesses, your contracts, can be enforced by the legal system. So it doesn't require you to have to enforce your arrangements with others with guns. But when you're in a gang or a drug cartel or a terrorist organization, there is no legal system to help you enforce your arrangements with others. So if you have an arrangement with others, it's up to you to physically enforce it. So you have to create your own legal system through violence. And that creates violence on our streets, creates violence on the border, creates violence internationally. It's overall a bad thing. But at the same time, you make the effects of addiction worse. Okay? So, for example, with heroin, what happens is that when people go to buy heroin, when you're buying it from a black market drug dealer, there's no way for you to know what you're buying. A lot of times you're buying something laced with this, and then you end up having people more often overdose. Now, if there was a legal market, people would be liable for what they're selling. Okay, basically, they sell you something that you didn't know what you were buying, and you overdose. There's legal liability there. So there's going to be huge incentive on more transparency in what you're buying, which means there's going to be less likely to be a huge amount of overdoses. And also the whole idea of a gateway drug. Okay, part of the reason marijuana in itself is not a gateway drug. Okay, you don't suddenly want a larger high. That's not quite how it works. There's plenty of people who do marijuana who never do harder drugs. But where it can be a gateway drug is in the fact that in order for you to procure marijuana up until recently, you had to go to a black market dealer. And generally those black market dealers, all they care about is sales. And if they have other products like heroin, which are more addictive, or meth, which are more addictive, they're going to want to upsell you to that. So then you're going to have pressure from the salesperson, and they're going to use a lot less ethical sales tactics because it's a lot less transparent. There's no one to call them out on it. Okay, no one's going to be like, oh, well, that drug dealer sold me drugs. But let's say you bought your marijuana at Walgreens and they try to upsell you to heroin, there'd probably be public outcry and they'd be shamed out of not doing that. So again, that transparency helps them behave more ethically. While you don't have that in a black market, so you end up having more aggressive sales tactics, that does lead people who are looking for a lot less dangerous drugs and pushes them into more dangerous drugs. At the same time, you have the increased incidences of overdoses because of the impurity of the drugs. So drug prohibition, like any prohibition, leads to black markets lead to violence, and that just makes everything generally worse. At the same time, you're wasting resources. Think of the millions of dollars we spend enforcing drug laws and all the things that could be used to help rebuild and maintain current infrastructure, which is a whole other discussion, to basically help plug the deficit, pay down the debt, all sorts of different things. Okay, so overall, drug prohibition, as all prohibitions, is a bad policy. So I'm glad to see that people are for ending prohibition, but again, just because if we legalize marijuana outright, it wouldn't necessarily be the biggest industry anymore. Because a big factor in this is that the fact that it is about, actually it's $17.65 per pound according to this article. Okay? But that price isn't necessarily a true market price because you don't necessarily have a free market. If you had a national market in marijuana and you had people all over the country being able to be freely produce marijuana, that price would go way down. I mean, you're talking about probably, maybe even eventually free because people would just be able to grow it in their backyards. Which honestly, that's the way it should be. You should be able to be free to grow whatever you want, wherever you want. So if you own your property and you want to grow some cannabis in your backyard, go for it. That should be how it works. But in that case, if that were the case, you would have pretty much a very, very low market price. It'd become pretty much as affordable as oregano. The reason why it can be so expensive and it can be so lucrative at the moment is because there's so many restrictions on the provision of it. So again, that's just why I find the whole idea that if you want to sell it, you want to sell legalization based on the effect it will have on the economy, you got to be realistic. Yes, there are going to be improvements in the economy because of ending prohibition, and the money the resources that are saved from enforcement of the prohibition, from new industries that are created out of it. You will have new marijuana business establishments in industrial hemp, in providing recreational and medicinal marijuana. There will be industries, but they're not going to necessarily be as lucrative as the small pockets you have now because they're only small pockets. There isn't the level of competition and supply that would exist otherwise. So that's my main issue with sort of the way the left sells legalization. They sell it that it's going to be this amazing, huge, ridiculous increase to the economy as a whole, and that we can tax it. No, don't tax it. Let everyone do what they want. And if it does help the economy, great. It should. But don't oversell it. Because once you oversell something, that's going to... The fact that things don't play out the way you expected it is going to be the exact criticisms that people are going to make to argue going even further. So that's my thoughts on this article this week. My name is Alex Merced. You listen to Breaking Progressives. Again, we take articles from different progressive outlets every week. We kind of talk about some of the bad narratives within these articles and just kind of help clarify things and think about things more clear. Now, I have a lot of other podcasts you can listen to over there. Just go on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and just search Alex Merced so you can listen to all the podcasts I got out there. Everything ranging from tips on podcasting, self-development, other sort of more libertarian podcasts, all sorts of different stuff. Just search Alex Merced. We got some other new ones coming up on the way. You can also buy t-shirts. So if you want to buy a t-shirt, head over to alexmerced.com, and we got all sorts of really cool new t-shirts that we've put up over the last few days. And thank you very much for listening to the show. Tell your friends about the show, and let's keep getting the word out so that way we can get these bad narratives out of the discussion so we can have a better discussion about actual issues. So I'll see you guys next time.